Io comincio a collegarmi a Teams.
Se vuoi, sì.
Non so perché... Ok.
Perché c'è in spagnolo, non l'ho capito. Però...
stavo cercando di capirlo anch'io, però va bene. Siamo... Vabbè.
Vediamo un po' che fai la settimana prossima.
Allora, io comincio a
Vedo dei pranzi soprattutto. Ma...
Ma tra l'altro,
soprattutto.
Le divinità si invocano, si sa che è un processo che richiede una particolare...
Vedrei il primo piano.
Infatti sto per cambiare video. Ok, inquadriamo il tuo braccio.
Sì, il mio tatuaggio.
Come microfono usiamo il Jabra.
Questo è un tenant ID, ragazzi. Non sto scherzando.
Questo è un tenant ID, veramente.
Tenant ID dell'azienda dove lavoravo prima. Eccolo qua.
Sì, mo te lo passo lo schermo.
Ma adesso lo farà per tutte le aziende, quindi esattamente come per gli alberi con gli anelli concentrici nel caso di Emanuele, i guidi.
Lo porto all'HR, guarda, io ho cambiato un po' di lavori.
Beh, di buono c'è che puoi cambiare 2 alla 128 lavori.
Esatto. L'unica cosa è che devo sostituire veramente il tatuaggio invece di Office, che mi hanno cambiato il logo, i maledetti, dopo anni. Questo devo cambiarlo. Vabbè.
Ragazzi, Steve Sanderson è in sala d'attesa, lo facciamo entrare?
Non lo so.
Perché mo ti vedrà da lì e ti sentirà da qui, ok? Mi dai un ok, Sal? Ci siamo? Ok. Oh, non l'ho fatto a tempo, scusate.
No, che sei matto?
No,
la chiamata, oh. Fallo fare a lui, per amor di Dio. Sei matto.
Non mi vuoi?
Io inizierei con un Padre Nostro, così magari torna. Eccolo. Hey Steve, welcome. Steve?
Hey.
Hey, can you hear us? Yes or not?
Yes, I do.
Oh, good. Perfect. I love your London accent, by the way. And so, thank you very much for coming to our session. Let's say remotely, but thank you. Thank you very much. We have a lot of questions about you.
Inviting me?
Yeah, sorry?
Oh, sorry. I just said thank you for inviting me.
No, it's fine. It's a pleasure for us, not for you. And so I don't introduce you because everyone knows you, because you are the creator of Blazor, the creator of Knockout, the creator, or let's say the father of Blazor. So everyone knows you. So it's not a problem to introduce you. But if you want, you can spend some minutes to introduce you, Steve. Minutes or hours,
Sure, okay.
I don't know.
All right. Well, yeah, so I'm a developer. I work at Microsoft. I've worked in web technology since the start of my career, which is, I suppose, 20 years now. And I have pretty much enjoyed focusing on web UI throughout that time. I enjoyed doing stuff with JavaScript to make interactive UI quite a long time ago, and that is what led me into making a series of UI frameworks like Knockout that you mentioned, and then to take advantage of WebAssembly when that came along to create Blazor. So yeah, that's kind of my story with this stuff up to now.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Steve. But I have a question for you. But if you define you as a developer, let's say a normal developer, what we are? Yes, say. We are a junior developer. I don't know.
I spend all my time writing code, just like I imagine most of you do. So yes, I think that means a developer.
Thank you. So we can start with the first version. The question. Sorry. How do you see Blazor evolving in the near future? I mean,
well, in the near future, we're working towards .NET 8 at the moment, and the big goal for .NET 8 is to try to unify Blazor Server and WebAssembly to create a single technology that gives people the best of both of those. We want to stop people from having to decide at the beginning of their project, am I going to use server or WebAssembly, and say, well, why not just have one thing that can do everything, you know, and decide as you go along. So some parts of your app might be server, some parts might be WebAssembly, some parts might not need either. Maybe some parts of your site can just render HTML on the server without needing any interactivity. And we want Blazor to be a single programming model that can support all of that. So that's the primary goal for that. And then longer term, we are, well, to be honest, we're not really thinking much beyond that at the moment, because we're mostly focused on trying to deliver that really well, and then hopefully collect feedback from the community about how this changes the way that you build your apps and what needs arise and what we can do to support the community better after that.
Yeah, thank you. And do you think Blazor could be the main solution for cross-platform development in the near future, or in the future in general?
Yeah, so cross-platform UI is definitely one of our focus areas. The main way that we do that at the moment is through MAUI, and the main way that people use Blazor with MAUI is through rendering web UI. So in a similar way to Electron for desktop apps or for Cordova for mobile apps, it's possible to use Blazor with MAUI to create, to write your UI once using web rendering with HTML and CSS and the rest of Blazor, and then have that deployed to Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. So that's our main approach to cross-platform UI. We have had a different approach that we've experimented with in the past, which was called mobile Blazor bindings. That's a bit of a niche product. Currently, it's not supported. It's just an experiment. And that's a bit different from MAUI in that, although it still uses Blazor, it doesn't use web. So there's no HTML and CSS. It's just producing native UI elements for each platform. So we haven't found as much customer demand in that as we had for web-based UI, but we're keeping close eye on it. And if people do start to want to produce more native UI, then we may go back to that.
And I have another question, very similar, but let's say we can talk about it, I think, for 1 hour. What will the future with Blazor and MAUI? I mean, they follow different tracks, or maybe you have some point of contact or stuff like that?
Well, we work with the MAUI team very closely. Every week we have meetings with the developers on MAUI and the program managers to make sure these things align. I think at the very start of that collaboration, we didn't know how that was going to go. And the MAUI team perhaps thought that Blazor was a bit of a kind of a side show for them. Like it was just this little thing that, oh, maybe a few people are going to want to use Blazor for this. But what's actually turned out in practice is that Blazor is a huge part of their community. I don't think it's quite the majority, but it's maybe like half or something like that of all MAUI usage is through Blazor. So it's a massive thing for them. And so there's a very strong incentive to collaborate closely. And they absolutely want to keep all of the latest Blazor features working well with MAUI. And likewise, Blazor team needs to work with MAUI to make sure that that we can build on top of everything they're doing. So I think the future is very close collaboration there. And yeah, because it's just turned out in practice that a lot of people want to do that.
Thank you very much. And we'll be able in .NET 8 or 9, I don't know, to have a server-side rendering with the Blazor WASM, like React or Next.js.
Yes, absolutely. So that is that's our biggest architectural change for Blazor in .NET 8. A lot of it is inspired by some of the JavaScript frameworks. I think Next.js is the one that is the most advanced out of these. I did a lot of studying of those frameworks, of Next, of Nuxt as well, which is the one for Vue, SvelteKit, Astro, Solid Start. I think those were the main ones that I investigated. Of those, I would say Next.js is the most the most interesting to me. It's the one that's pushed technology forwards and invented quite a lot of interesting new ideas, and we've been able to follow on with some of those same patterns and principles of being able to do server first programming. So where possible, hopefully your stuff is just resolved completely on the server. It doesn't involve relying on WebAssembly or WebSockets. And for the parts of your site that you can render that way on the server, it's much cheaper to deliver. You know, you can scale up to a much larger number of users per server with that kind of, with components that are simple like that. So that's a major focus for us, and absolutely the biggest thing that we're trying to enable with .NET 8.
I love it. Can you share some ideas, if you can, of course, about the roadmap of Blazor United?
So we're on preview 4 is the current thing that's just been released, and what we produced in preview 4 is the basic server-side rendering capability. So this is simply using the Blazor components that you already write today, your existing components, and having them be used for a pure HTML website. So it's kind of like a pre-rendering only mode, but it integrates much more closely with the ASP.NET Core server-side router than anything that we've done in the past. So that was preview 4. In preview 5, we're laying a lot of the foundations for enabling interactive components on top of that. So we've defined this concept of render modes, where you can go to any component and say, I want this to render as a server component or as a WebAssembly component, and then we can produce the right markup in the output so that it can become interactive. In preview 6, we will actually turn on the ability for them to really be interactive. We have to do quite a bit of work on our JavaScript code to enable that, but that's when that should light up. And in preview 5, I forgot to mention, there's also the new project template. So you may know, if you've worked with Blazor, that today we have got a Blazor server template and a Blazor WebAssembly template, and they're completely separate things. We're trying to unify that so that there's one primary Blazor template, because the idea is, like I said, you don't have to decide up front which rendering technology you use. You just create your Blazor website, and by default, it will just be server rendered, statically server rendered only, so just HTML. And then you will go into individual components and turn on interactive server rendering or interactive WebAssembly rendering. And if you just want to do things in the traditional way, where everything is server rendered or everything is WebAssembly rendered, well, you just go to your root component and mark that as server or WebAssembly. So you have all the flexibility that you did before, but we don't need as many different project templates. So that's previews 5, 6 that are coming up. And after that, I'm not sure exactly what's going to land in preview 7 and 8, but I guess we have to finish this thing. So whatever turns out to be left by that time.
Thank you. I have another question about the future of Blazor, but more, let's say, specific. How do you imagine Blazor in 5 years?
Wow. Honestly, I don't know that I or anyone can predict where technology will go over that kind of time frame. I would say, Blazor itself is not even 5 years old yet, or it's just coming up to being 5 years old. Would we have known where it would have got to when we started? Like, would we have foreseen Maui? Would we have foreseen the server-side rendering that we're doing in .NET 8? Probably not. I don't think I can realistically predict what's going to be in .NET 13. I don't know. I'd love to hear your ideas. Whatever you think is, the long-term future, let me know. But I don't really have a crystal ball. I can't see that far, I'm afraid.
But I think it's not an easy question, of course. You have always accustomed us to extraordinary things. What will be your next big experiment or project?
I do love a good prototype. I've been doing quite a lot of work with WebAssembly on the server recently. So you may have heard the term WASI. WASI is a standard for allowing WebAssembly to do useful stuff outside the browser. WebAssembly has always been a browser-centric thing since it was created and first made available in 2017. But in the last few years, people have focused a lot on trying to take it to new places. And I've been focusing on making sure that .NET will work on WebAssembly in these new environments. So that's a big focus for me at the moment. We have made a decision to include support for that in .NET 8. It's going to be just experimental, but it will be there as part of the default SDK that you can create a WASI project. We haven't announced or talked about this very much, but we have got a blog post that we are writing collaboratively as a team at the moment, and we're all adding our ideas and demos and things like that. So hopefully in the next week or two, that will get published and you'll be able to see in detail a lot of these ideas. The other thing that comes out of running .NET on WebAssembly in new places is that we can do new kinds of things. So another experiment that I've been doing recently is using WebAssembly as an isolation technology so that you can run different parts of your application in an isolated way, which is great if there's parts of your code that you don't completely trust. Maybe you're using third-party dependencies, and we can run them in a way that guarantees it can't interfere with the rest of your server. We had a really cool product reveal just yesterday from Mark Rasinovich, who showed a technology called Hyperlight. Did anyone catch that in Mark's talk? I wouldn't expect so necessarily because it was late at night Italian time. Anyway, Hyperlight is a way of creating micro VMs. So, using Hyper-V, you can create a virtual machine, but they're quite heavy, right? You expect each one is going to take many seconds to create, and it probably takes hundreds of megabytes of memory. You're not going to get more than about 10 of them on one machine. Well, with Hyperlight, we can have like 100,000 of them on one machine, and we can create them in at 1 millisecond. That is incredibly, ridiculously fast that we can create these things. And so it allows us to have hardware level isolation for your code with very, very low overhead. And so I did a bit of work with that team to run .NET on top of that. So we can run tiny .NET virtual machines that start up in almost no time and cost you very little memory. And that allows new kinds of architectures. For example, we can very easily have a web server, a .NET web server, in which every request is handled in a separate micro VM. And the benefits of that would be to absolutely guarantee that you can never, ever leak any memory, because it's just impossible. Like, all the memory is going to be gone at the end of the request. You can never accidentally leak any state between different users. And if any of your third-party dependencies are trying to do something hostile, well, they pretty much can't, because they can't access anything else. They can't access network or disk or anything. So, there was a famous case with a logging library called log4j, which is a Java thing just last year, where it contained some malware, and it was trying to extract people's data from their servers. Well, if you had that sort of situation in which every call to it was inside a separate VM, it wouldn't be able to do that. It wouldn't be able to read your other data. And even if it could, it wouldn't be able to access the network to send it to someone else. So that it's quite separate from Blazor, but it's an area that is related in that it also involves .NET and WebAssembly. And I think that's an interesting area to look into.
You just answered to my following question. So thank you very much again. And I have another question, but please don't shoot the pianist. But someone asked me to to talk about Silverlight. If you have some words about Silverlight.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Silverlight is not something I've ever had much connection with. I never used Silverlight professionally, and it was already dead before I even joined Microsoft. So I've got very little connection with that. All I can say on that is, yes, it was from a different era of web technology. It was from a plugins era in which companies like Microsoft and Adobe and others would create their own proprietary extensions to the web and try and persuade people to use it. And that's just how the web was at that point in time. But the web is not like that anymore. The idea of having completely proprietary stuff just doesn't make sense in the modern world. And so Blazor has never tried to rely on anything like that and never would be able to. So I don't really think that anything that applies to Silverlight really applies to Blazor, because it's just, you know, it is not following anything like the same sort of web technology. Perhaps the basis of your question is that some people like Silverlight and want to bring it back. I don't know if that's the basis of the question. We have no plans. I mean, I understand in theory we could recreate the Silverlight programming model on WebAssembly or something like that, but there just isn't any significant demand that I'm hearing that would make us likely to do that.
Thank you very much. I asked to the attendees if they have other questions. Anche in italiano, va bene? Certo, in inglese. Vai in inglese, vai in inglese.
When, if all Microsoft sites will be rendered in Blazor.
Yeah, it's a great point to raise, and I think that we've got to. I won't try and hide from the fact that most of Microsoft's sites are not built with Blazor. Microsoft is a big company. It doesn't have a single unified view on how to do everything. Different parts of the company make different technology choices. And probably the most influential choices that have been made were by the Office team. And the Office team made some choices about 5 years ago, maybe. That was roughly when they decided to rebuild all of their web technology, around 5 years ago. And at that time, they decided to use React, which was a good choice for them at that time, and probably still is a good choice now. Obviously, they couldn't choose Blazor at that time because Blazor didn't exist, it was at most like a sort of experimental, uncommitted thing at that time. They were obviously not going to use it. So it's not surprising that they picked React at that time, and they've kept that investment going. Would they ever throw all of that stuff away and switch to Blazor? I don't know. I mean, that would cost them tens of millions of dollars, maybe a lot more. What would they get from that? They would have to persuade all of their teams to become .NET developers. I don't think that that's likely to happen anytime soon. You've got to remember, and I always keep trying to remind people inside Microsoft, that the choice between something like React and Blazor is primarily a choice between JavaScript and .NET, because that's the biggest impact that it has on a team's lifestyle and experience. And when you've spent years building up JavaScript skills, it would be a big thing for them to make those teams retrain as .NET developers. So I don't expect that. But one thing that might change this a little bit is for the web technologies that are primarily server rendered. The Microsoft has many sites that are about rendering HTML. And what we're doing with Blazor in .NET 8 should make it entirely possible for them to do that. So I hope and expect to see a lot of the HTML rendering sites switch over to use Blazor from whatever stuff they've been using before, because in most cases that's not React or JavaScript. It's other .NET technologies or things like WordPress and stuff like that. So yes, I think there is absolutely the opportunity to do that, but I would not expect to see Office or Teams rewriting Blazor.
Bye.
Is there something that you like from other words, like Angular, React, something that you like to bring
in Blazor?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's stuff in all the major JavaScript UI frameworks that's good and valuable. I actually think some of them are more innovative than others. I'm not going to exactly say which, because I don't want to cause controversy, but let's say two in particular that I'm really appreciative of are React and Svelte. So I think there's nothing novel about saying React is an impressive technology. Everyone knows that. It brought a lot of new ideas, perhaps not so much in recent years, but in the beginning, you know, it really changed the way we thought about single page applications. And then more recently, Svelte has come along to show ways of combining server and client, which are quite impressive. And we're able to do some of that stuff with Blazor in .NET 8, following on from some of those patterns. And if I had to pick one thing from all these other technologies that I would love to get into Blazor, it would be something more like JSX syntax. So, you know, with Razor, when you're combining HTML with some other language, there's kind of two ways to do it. You can either have the other language on the outside producing HTML fragments, or you can have the HTML on the outside with bits of language on the inside. And JSX is JavaScript first with bits of HTML inside it, whereas Razor is HTML first with bits of C# inside it. And although there's lots of nice things about Razor, I am a bit jealous of JSX sometimes. The fact that it's possible to have individual methods that just return fragments of markup and combine them in, you know, arbitrary ways. It's sort of possible-ish to do that with Razor, but it's much, much less natural. So yeah, that would be my top pick. If I could steal something from another technology, I would take something like JSX and maybe call it CSX or something like that, and have the ability to just put HTML inside arbitrary C# files.
Altre? No? No, it's fine, Steve. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
And when you show us Blazor for the first time at MVP Summit, there was a guy that asked you a selfie on the stage, and yeah, I was the guy.
Oh, amazing.
So,
well, I'm glad to make contact again.
So thank you very much, Steve, again. See you soon.
All right.
To the next
Have a wonderful
MVP Summit.
day. Hope your event goes really well.
Good. Thank you very much, Steve, again.
All right. Bye then.